Awesome. No turning back. So normally when I do these kinds of talks, I really like to look at the audience, ask questions, see them nod their heads, raise their arms. And that's hard to do in this format because, of course, we're not all in the same space. But I'm going to really try to do some of these same things. And so during the talk, you'll see that I will stop and I'll ask you questions. And I know that not all of you can actually talk and answer questions. Those of you who can, please feel free to unmute and talk or respond in the chat pod. And those of you who can't, I will post a URL to the form where you can actually participate as well. So please, please participate. I hope that makes this next hour or so more fun and more engaging and keeps you away from checking your email and all the other things going on your computers. So, oh, all right, here we go. Okay, so first a little bit about Adobe Research. Michael, thank you for doing that really nice introduction, but I will be honest, I am not the person who started this growth in 200 people. There were others there ahead of me, but Adobe Research is very much a thriving research lab. We are actually very close to you at Stanford. We have two offices, one in San Jose, one in San Francisco. I personally am based in Seattle. And then on the East Coast, we have an office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then in College Park, Maryland. And then abroad, we have a London office and a Bangalore office. And we work across a variety of research areas, including computer graphics, computer vision, audio, natural language processing, machine learning. And HCI is really at the heart of many of our projects. And so it's really nice to be here talking to all of you who are hopefully as interested as I am in HCI. Our main goal at Adobe Research is to do cutting edge research, and we publish our work across some of the top academic venues like CHI and WIST and SIGGRAPH. In addition, we've also focused on taking these ideas and putting them into products. And so here you see impact on two of our products, Photoshop with Content Aware Move and Premiere with 360 video editing. And these projects, these ideas were research papers originally before they ever made it into product. Now, I know that many of you are students, and I know it's that time of year when you're trying to figure out what's going on with the coming year. And so I did want to let you know that we are looking for interns. We had a remote internship program this year. I think the current plan is to do another remote internship program next year, but of course, as things develop, that may change. I also wanted to tell you about our fellowship and scholarship programs. They just opened their applications. The fellowship program is for PhD students, and the scholarship program is for master's students and undergraduate students. And I encourage you to check them out. They're both great. They include a $10,000 award and an opportunity to interview for an internship. And then I also wanted to share that we are also looking to fill full-time positions. So if you are graduating, definitely check out our website and apply. And again, I'm also happy to answer questions about Adobe Research as a whole or about anything job related at the end of the talk. So back to our topic. So I gave, as I said in the little introduction, when Michael and I were going back and forth, I gave a first version of this talk actually a year ago. And at that time, the video, the title was Video as the Core Communication Tool of the Future. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and 2020 really took our world, at least took my world, and turned it upside down. And so I thought, well, maybe the title is wrong. Maybe it should be Video as the Core Communication Tool of the Present, because after all, everything I do is over video now. But then I thought about it some more and I said, well, even though I'm actually in front of video conferencing all day long, the way we actually think about video or work with video is really not that different. And so I kept the title as is, and said, well, it's still the core communication tool of the future. And so now is this moment when I ask you, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you agree with this thesis, or do you disagree? So those of you who can't talk to me, oh my gosh, look, we have a poll. You can vote in the poll, so that's exciting. Hopefully you all can see this poll. You can also just turn on your audio and talk, or you can use the form to respond. Anyone? Are you all voting? Yes, maybe. I see nodding. You are voting. Okay, we'll give you some more minutes to vote. In the meanwhile, do you want to write anything in the chat pod or say anything, anyone?
We've just crossed 80 votes.
Oh, wow. How many people do we have?
117.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you all for coming. Okay.
All right, we're slowing down. We got 89. Can we hit 90? Can I have 90?
Maybe. I could vote, I guess. Let me do that.
Oh, we hit 91. All right, here we go. I'm going to end the poll and we'll show ourselves our results. We got 92. Share results.
Can you all see the poll? Yes, awesome. Okay. Oh my gosh, all of you agree, but some of you disagree. Not all of you agree. Many of you agree, but some of you definitely disagree. And so I'm curious, those of you who disagree, does anybody want to say more about why they disagree?
I can chime in.
Sure.
So I want to agree with you, so I'm here to be convinced, but I disagree in the sense that I think video has an immediacy to it in ways that other types of communication tools don't, that are advantageous as well, right? Such as texting, such as types of communication that don't require me to make sure I look good in order to be in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that these are all things in which we still need to consider as a set of communication tools versus just one main one.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And I, when the announcement for this talk actually went out this week, I got a couple of emails from folks who said, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this. And one of them was actually Marty Hurst, who's a professor at UC Berkeley. And she was like, I really feel like there's this trend away from text and towards video, kind of that's her feeling. And so she was excited to hear about this talk. And but like you, actually, I would say that the pandemic world has made me do a lot more writing than I ever did before. So I agree with you in that it's not really an either or, like it's not just going to be video, it's not just going to be text. I think that there is absolutely a place for all different kinds of communication. I just think that video as a communication tool is a place where I think there's a gap. And so that's part of why I make this claim. So with that, let's jump in. So this talk was inspired by research that I learned about a year and a half ago. And it was done by one of our research teams at Adobe. And they had spent several months visiting K-12 classrooms across the United States, learning about the technology the students were engaging with in the classroom at that time. Now, remember, this is a year and a half ago, so pre-pandemic time, right? The world is probably different, and it would be really interesting to do this research again. But at that time, here's what the world looked like. So they talked to about 50 teachers, administrators, and students, and visited a mix of public and private schools, and also looked at some of the quantitative research that had been done in this space, really trying to understand what are the technology trends in schools. And what I learned that day when I was watching this report being presented is that in schools at that time, there were two types of tools. There were special project tools and core communication tools. As you might imagine, special project tools are tools that are being used for projects. Things like making posters with images, videos, telling a story, interactive reports, small books. And the tools that students use really varied a lot across teachers. There was no one tool that each teacher encouraged their students to use. In contrast, core communication tools were widely used across just about every teacher that the research team spoke with. And some teachers mentioned that they would actually scaffold use of these tools. So they would introduce different parts of them over time and really, wanted the students to learn how to do this, how to use these tools. Some of them started teaching them as early as kindergarten. And really these teachers felt that familiarity with these tools is an important part of computer literacy. So as I sat there listening to this report, the question I asked myself was, what are the core communication tools of the future, right? So for today, you can, based on the icons, you can guess these core communication tools are things like PowerPoint, things like documents, right? But I asked myself, well, what are the tools that every student will need to know to be successful in life in the future? And of course, I put my Adobe hat on, right? I work at Adobe, not at Microsoft or Google. And I asked myself, you know, Adobe's tools fall on this special project side. Like, are there any of Adobe's tools that will ever be core communication tools that will be, especially in the space of creative work, will they ever be core communication tools? And so, of course, given the title of this talk, I'm sure you will not be surprised that I zeroed in on video, largely because I see there's huge growth in video communication, and yet like a huge gap in how we use video and how we work with video. So let's look at some examples. So I showed you some information about Adobe Research earlier in the talk, and I flashed some numbers. I even maybe showed you some URLs. And before maybe you had a chance to really see any of this information, write it down, take a screenshot, I moved on. And you know, this happens all the time. It happens to me all the time. I'm listening to a talk, something happens, and by the time I write it down, or I sit down and write it down, it's too late. And so maybe you actually can, the only way you can get access to this information is to, you know, look at a recording, right? Michael and Catherine are recording this talk. I'm sure you'll get the link. And so here is a recording of a practice I gave to myself yesterday. And so now maybe, you know, you have this recording and you want to find that part where you have the numbers. And so you're jumping around and it's really hard to figure out, where is it? Out there, you know, maybe I'm interested in an internship, there is the URL, right? So figuring out how to get information from videos, very hard. Something connected to this happened to me. I missed a keynote at last year's CHI conference. I couldn't see it live, but my colleagues saw it and they said, Mira, this is a really, really good talk. There's some really great insights in there. You have to watch it. So I said, awesome, okay, I will watch it. But then of course, I didn't have an hour to watch the talk and I didn't have any clue how to get to the parts that my colleagues thought I should watch. I also knew there was a back channel. There's always a back channel, but I had no way to layer on that information and use it as a way to look through that video. Maybe today there is a back channel. Maybe all of you are talking, and maybe that means, you know, if you're talking a lot, maybe that means that my talk is really boring, or maybe you really agree or disagree with something I'm saying. Either way, I'd like to know about it. That way I can adjust and hopefully make this as good as possible for you. So as I thought about video and what a core communication tool for video would look like, I created a framework to help me think about video tasks. And so let's walk through it. So one axis of this framework is, are you trying to create video or are you consuming video? So what are you doing with video? Another one is this an interactive task or a passive task, right? So sitting down and watching TV or watching a movie, that's a passive task. Actually trying to like browse a video and quickly find some information, that's interactive. Another axis is this an iterative task or a one-time task, right? So do you do this over and over with the same video or just one time? Individual or collaborative? Are you doing this with others or by yourself? And then if you are doing it with others, is this synchronous or asynchronous? So let's go through some examples of how to apply the framework. So you are all attending this talk. For you, this is the consumption task. For some of you, it's totally passive, you're just listening. For others, it is interactive. Maybe you're jotting things down. Maybe you're even, you know, interacting with me with the questions. It is a one-time experience. I don't think I'll come back and do it again. It is collaborative, we're doing this together. You're doing this with others. And it is very much synchronous. Now, let's say you're actually watching a recording of this talk. For you, this would be, again, a consumption experience. It may be, again, totally passive, or you may be pausing and playing at times. It may be a multiple experience. You know, when we're watching videos, you may come back to this over and over again. Maybe you watch it once, you come back for something else. It's something that you're going to do likely by yourself. I mean, some people are doing these things more collaboratively these days, but in general, it's individual. And so, it's therefore individual. Now let's look at me making this talk. So I made this talk. I am not creating a video. However, I did work with video to put in this talk, right? So I had to consume a bunch of videos to put into my talk, and then I had to trim them and clip out parts and remove audio. And so I had to deal with video, so it's kind of somewhat video creation, very much interactive, very much iterative. Most of it I did on my own, but I also got feedback from others. So I got feedback from my team. And some of that feedback I got live through, a meeting kind of like this. But some of it I also got over email. So I had some asynchronous feedback. I'll give you one more example. It's kind of yet another point in the space. So this is my friend Debbie. She has a business selling spices, actually, but she also, part of her business is about virtual cooking classes. And so if you subscribe to her class, you will get a box. And then on the day of the cooking class, you join her live cooking experience over video conferencing. So very much like what we're doing right now. And so she has a small number of people in their own kitchens cooking with her simultaneously. And then she's also broadcasting kind of to the public, and the public is not cooking with her. They're just watching what's going on, right? So I attended one of her virtual cooking classes. For me, this was really a video consumption experience, right? I was cooking. I was not editing video. It was very passive for some people, right? The people who are not like interacting and trying to cook together and asking questions, they're just watching, much like maybe you would watch a cooking show at home on TV. But for those who were part of the live cooking class, it was very interactive. It was, again, a one-time experience. It was very much collaborative and synchronous. So I hope these examples convince you that touching video is part of almost everything we do today. Yet our interfaces for viewing and working with video remain the same. The interface is the same no matter what I do. I could be watching a movie, or I could be trying to fix my sink. And this is really where I think we need to focus as an HCI community, is to make using video easier. We really need to invent new ways to work with video. The good news is that the computer vision and audio communities have really made a lot of progress in helping us understand what's in video, or helping machines understand what's in video. So many machines now can see people and objects. They can understand what's happening, what motion, what scenes are, what geometry. And we can take the sounds, and if it's speech, transcribe that into words, and also understand where there are different kinds of sounds happening in a video. And some of the early work in taking advantage of these capabilities starts with one of Stanford's own, Manish Agrawala. Manish, I saw you were in the audience. I was excited to have you here. Manish and his students were among the first to show how transcripts can make video and audio editing much easier. And today we even have commercial tools like BScript, that enable a new way to edit video that's much easier than what was possible before. So what does all of this video understanding technology mean for interfaces? So this is the next interactive part. What do you all think? What should video interfaces be in the 21st century? You all can fill out the form. You can type things in the chat. So to get you all thinking, maybe one thing all video should have in the 21st century, the table of contents, so that I don't have to do this crazy, hunting and pecking on the timeline. And we're already seeing that in YouTube. So for not for any YouTube author, but for many YouTube authors, if you write a table of contents in the description, they'll actually create an interface that's easier to find those sections. Another idea, maybe all videos should be translatable into documents. And so here you see some work from Valentina Shin, who's at Adobe, who's taken videos from Khan Academy videos Khan Academy style lectures and turns them into documents. So it's much easier to scan and learn from them. So what do you all think? What should video interfaces be? What should we imagine them to be?
While the panelists are queuing up, we have a few people who've responded to the form. I'll just read out what they said. One says, I'm imagining that VR and AR are something distinct from video. So maybe if they become big, that won't count as video. Someone else said, incorporate Control F for video to make it easier to skip through a video and find things faster, like Adobe's few shot audio detection project. A third person said, searchable text transcripts. A fourth person said, the ability to bookmark or make notes at different parts of a video. Now I've got a fifth that says, less clicking, more shortcuts.
That all sounds fantastic. And yes, I mean, Control F, you can already do this actually in some ways. Searchable transcripts, it's already available. So on YouTube, I don't know if all of you know, but you can turn on transcripts and you can search. I mean, it's not available for everything, but for many videos it is. And you can just use Command F in your browser, but it's not always enough. I think one thing that's interesting about search that I found myself is that yes, if I'm looking for something very specific, like a word somebody is saying, it can be effective. But if I want to know what this video is about and the right section to go to, words are not going to be enough. And so, but I agree with you with a lot of these ideas. Being able to search videos in the same way that we search documents is definitely something we'd love to see. The comment about VR and AR is also really interesting. And I can't remember exactly what the comment was. I think it is interesting to think about just what video will be or look like in a VR or AR environment. I know that there is some work at Adobe on using tutorials in VR environments. So if you are, for example, learning how to paint, how do you make use of others who have shared their way of painting? How do you take those videos and import them in VR and AR environments? I think there you're even more impoverished, right? So you don't have a mouse, you have these controllers. And so being able to browse these videos in a way that is easy is actually even more important. But certainly we expect to see lots and lots of changes to our interfaces as we explore some of these different modalities. Are there any more comments, Michael, or should we go ahead?
Oh yeah, we got more. Let's see. The ability to bookmark or make notes at different parts of a video. Another person says, less clicking, more shortcuts. Another person says, interactive and allowing for experimentation with alternate realities, especially in education videos, like deepfakes, but not as morally questionable. Another person says, auto-suggesting related or helpful external videos for each section. Someone else said, there should be interfaces. Like you mentioned, right now there's a single interface for different contexts or modes of consumption. I think there should be different domain-specific interfaces based on the context. Another one says, for verbal or oral communication in videos, controls related to the words per minute of the speaker rather than 1x or 1.5x or 2x speed, so that it's always catered to your speaking pace preferences.
Oh, I love that. That would be so cool. I have to say, I watch a lot of video recordings these days of meetings that I can't attend or have missed, and I never watch them at 1x. It's just torture. But you're right. Like some people I can listen to at 2x, and then others are speaking way too quickly, and so then I have to bring it down. So yeah, that would be really cool. It's a great idea. So some of these great ideas, I love the ideas of bookmarks. I think some of this is already possible too, because I do get links sometimes that jump me directly to specific parts in videos. So I think some of this is already coming to fruition, which is exciting to see. So let's take a look at a few examples. I think all of you are thinking of great ideas. I just want to show you 4 example systems that really rethink how we create and consume video. And I just want to say that these are 4 points in the space. Please don't think of this as an exhaustive list. There is a lot of fantastic work that I'm sure some of you working on this are here in the audience. So this is another interactive part. I have 4 systems that I want to talk about today, and you all get to vote on which one we talk about first. So I think Michael has a poll ready for you, and so you get to vote on one of the systems. And so we'll give you a few minutes. I know you don't really know what these systems are, so it's not really fair, but some of you do. And the rest of you, I guess, can vote based on your favorite name, favorite title.
We're at about 60 votes so far.
All right.
It's pretty neck and neck, actually.
Yeah. So we will, we'll do this after each system. So you will get to vote again for 2 more times.
I'm going to have to update the poll then.
I don't know if you can just rerun it, Michael, but anyways, we can try it.
I'll play with it. Okay. All right, we got 82. I think I'm calling it here.
All right.
This 83. This is extremely close.
Okay, I think
the position bias wins the day. by 2 votes, I'll note. Actually, no, by 1 vote. It beat Restream by 1 vote.
Fantastic. I mean, we are in a season of close elections, so there you go.
Too soon.
Too soon. I know. Sorry. I shouldn't. Anyway, let's not think about that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this. So let's talk about BScript. So BScript. So this system. So on that slide with all the different cool things happening in the world, one of the things I pointed out was transcript. And so what BScript does is it shows how we can use transcripts to make editing a video easier. And specifically, it focuses on B-roll video editing. So there's a rising trend in online videos for vlogging. Of course, I'm guessing you guys know this. This is a multi-billion-dollar business on YouTube with millions of subscribers. And these videos are often a vlogger, so like this guy, talking about some kind of topic. And so it's often like a headshot of him or her. But there's cutaways to some kind of effect. And this type of cutaway is what we call B-roll. And so the BScript system assists users with this last part, to find and insert B-roll that goes into making this video about this specific topic. And so this is what the BScript interface looks like. It has a video preview and a timeline transcript view, which supports navigation by clicking, and a search panel for actual B-roll footage, which is integrated with the interface. So users can double click on a word in the transcript and then search for relevant B-roll footage. Now, the core of the interface is actually a recommendation system. So it analyzes the transcript's text and makes recommendations for good locations for where to insert the B-roll and what the content of that B-roll should be. So here the green highlights indicate the recommended B-roll location, and then the keywords on the right show the actual query you could use to find relevant content. And so all you have to do as a user is click on that query, and then you see a list of potential B-roll that you can add to your video. So one thing before I show you the results, note that there is no like timeline, there is no in and out points. You're really just using the transcript as a way to decide where to add additional footage. And of course, this is one specific interface. It's not going to be general purpose for everything, but it is an example of what we can do if we really narrow down our use case. And so here are some examples on the left and on the right of kind of 2 of the same video, one with B-roll and one without. And so kind of quick, this is like a quick overview of what BScript is, but in this particular case, we see that the transcript-based interface is more efficient and as easy as a timeline-based interface. And these recommendations around what kind of content and how to get good content are really, really helpful. And so if we try to take the system and throw it into our framework, the one we discussed earlier, in BScript, you are creating video. So it's really a creation task. However, you're consuming B-roll footage as part of it, right? You can have to consume all these examples to figure out which ones to fit where. And the system is really designed to help you consume content more quickly, right? You don't have to watch all the B-roll. It's helping you find both where to put it and what good videos could be. It is an interactive experience, of course, it's iterative, and you do it on your own in this particular example. Okay, so what should we talk about next? Oriole, Mixed-T, or Restream? Michael, are you able to do the poll again? Perfect. So BScript is an option. but I promise you we will not talk about it again. So if you vote for it, I'm sorry, your vote will be wasted. So
we already have some third-party votes for BScript.
So please pick one of the others.
All right, we're at 75. It's tied right now. So we need at least one more person to vote.
I am not voting, so because that would be cheating.
We are currently deadlocked. People keep voting for the one that's not in the tie position. Okay. 5 seconds. Last chance. Well, here we go. We had 28 votes, restreamed by 1, and then 1 ahead of Mixed Tea.
Wow. Okay. So thank you all for voting. This is cool. Let's jump ahead to restream. Okay.
I'm just going to note that those BScript voters could have swung the election.
All right, so let's talk about Restream. So this was work done at Adobe. At the time, Ailey Fraser, who is now at Adobe, she was a PhD student at UCSD. And this is really looking at creative live streams. So I just kind of shifting gears a little bit. In BScript, we talked a lot about creation, right? We're creating videos. This is really all about consumption. So for the past several years, we've been studying creative live streaming, and there's a growing interest in general in creative live streaming at Adobe because there is a growing community of artists who are streaming live. This was true even before the pandemic, but of course, with the pandemic, it's really kind of increased significantly. And so here is an example of such a stream. And in general, artists are now broadcasting as they work on these creative projects, and they do this with multiple goals in mind. Some are teaching and trying to share their practice. Some are just working, actually, without talking very much. And then others use this platform to socialize with other artists. So note that artists are often freelancers and they may be at home working by themselves. And so getting connected to others through a stream is a way to build a community. And what's interesting about live streams is that they, unlike tutorials, show an unedited process behind the creative work. So it's not really a step-by-step tutorial. You see everything. You see the mistakes, the decisions, anything that happens along the way. And so we often think about live streams as something that people consume live, but many of these platforms also archive these videos, and then people can come back to them and watch them. Which is nice because, of course, not all of us can be there at the same time as each other, and especially when you have artists from all over the world streaming in their own time zones, it's not possible for each of us to catch up with the artists we love. So, and while these videos are pretty amazing and they have this like wealth of knowledge, it's pretty challenging to browse them, right? You can imagine many of these are 3-4 hours long. And it's just really hard to make sense of which parts to watch. And so in this work, we really focused on this idea of how do we take these creative live stream archives, these are videos that are quite long, how do we make it easier to watch and navigate them? One way to do that is with a table of contents that divides the content into sections. And many people do manually make these. As I said, YouTube now supports actually parsing of these descriptions. And then many websites, like this is Skillshare, actually add that as part of the authoring interface or as part of the video sharing interface directly. And so as part of this work, we spoke with streamers and viewers about the value of having such a table of contents and found that for streamers, they do see a value in having this table of contents, but they don't have the time to make it. So they've sat down, they've just streamed for multiple hours. The last thing they want to do is actually do anything for that content. And for viewers, it was really useful to see a table of contents as an overview and get a quick understanding of what happened. However, we also found that viewers of the same video really differed in what they wanted from a table of contents, and that there was no right way for us to segment creative live streamers. So some were really interested in specific techniques, others really wanted to know kind of the overall experience. And so the other part of this is that these streams don't often have as obvious of a structure as tutorials, and so it makes it harder to figure out what table of contents to create. But on the other hand, since there are many different possible segmentations, many different possible table of contents, perhaps any table of content is better. Table of contents is better than nothing. And so to do this, we put together an approach, and it's a user in the loop approach. So the system first automatically segments the live stream into sections, and then the streamer uses this automatic segmentation and adds titles and adjusts any sections. So sometimes there might be two smaller sections that really should be one, and so the streamer can put them together. And this allows the streamer to really maintain agency over their content. How does this work? We have a segmentation algorithm that can take advantage of, well, in general, the way you would want to do this is you would want to look at both what's happening visually. You would want to look at what the audio is, like what is the streamer saying, what's happening in the software. You know, if you have access to that or you're able to extract that from the video, what are the tools someone's using? And then of course you have the chat. So you can take all this information and try to create a table of contents. In this particular work, we used only the narration and the software actions. In subsequent work, we've looked at how to take advantage of the visual information as well. And so the algorithm essentially identifies candidate boundaries based on the software actions and the narration, identifies intro and outro because they look quite different than the middles, and then combines the remaining intervals into sections. And to determine what these sections should be, we use a scoring function that combines 4 heuristics. One of them is around duration. We prioritized in this particular project that sections should be between 1 and 10 minutes long based on our conversations with streamers. We also, based on prior work, found that certain commands indicate the start and end of a subtask. Also, we found that certain tasks streamers use the same tools in certain tasks. So they group certain tools as they're working on a specific task. And then last, we looked at the transcript semantics and looked for words like start and next and done, and that's all, because those often also indicate transitions. So to evaluate the algorithm's output with streamers, we built a prototype interface and had them actually use it and evaluate both the sections that the algorithm created and then also labeled them. And so this is an example of what it looks like after someone has labeled it. And we also had the fortune of being able to work with the Behance team, which is Adobe's creative social network. And a version of this algorithm is actually deployed now on the website. And so if you go to the Behance website, you'll see that some of the live streams have chapters that are segmented and give an overview. And so some of the takeaways from Restream are that streamers really like the automatically created sections, and the algorithm definitely performed better on some streams than others. Instructional streams where there is a linear structure and you go from one section to the next are much easier to segment in a meaningful way than streams where there's a lot of back and forth and the streamer isn't quite sure what process they're going to follow. So that type of exploration is harder to discover with the current approach that we've been trying. And so that's definitely an interesting space for future work. And so if we look at the how Restream fits into the framework, it is definitely a consumption interface. It is interactive. It's something that you can use over and over or just one time, it depends on your consumption. And then again, it's something that you use on your own. All right, so we have one last poll. I think between Oriole and Mixty, which system would you guys like to talk about next? Michael, do you want to show them the poll? Okay.
So my question is, shouldn't your tools allow us to just watch this in any order, depending on which tool we wanted to hear about?
Oh, I mean, yes, if this was a video that was pre-recorded, but you guys get me live, so I can't talk about all of them at the same time.
You're basically about the equivalent of a random access talk, the closest I've ever seen. We got 77 votes out of 126 people here. 78? Let's see if we can hit 80. All right, we got 80. I'm gonna do the network thing of calling this vote because it's clear.
I love it. Oh wow, big win for Mixty. I mean, compared to the last round of
this is why ranked choice voting is valuable. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Let me jump to Mixty. Okay. So let's kind of, before I jump into Mixty, to recap. So we had BScript, which shows you how to use, or shows how we could use transcripts. Then we had Restream, which is really all about making use of tool commands and transcripts and trying to kind of, give you a better consumption experience for these live streams by giving you a table of contents. What Mixty is trying to do is really trying to kind of look at the space between, he's trying to address the situations where a video on its own is just not enough. And so this is work from probably the oldest of the works that I've shown you here is from WIS 2012, collaboration with Peggy Chi, who is now at Google, and Bjorn Hartman from UC Berkeley. And really the question we had at the time was, there are lots of benefits to static tutorials, and there are lots of benefits to videos. How might we combine these two videos? How might we combine these two formats? While there are benefits to static and there are benefits to video, there are also drawbacks. And so what we were trying to do is kind of take the best of both worlds and come up with something in between. To be more concrete, static tutorials are really easy for scanning, right? You can quickly scroll down that page and say, hey, oh, this is exactly the tutorial I want. This is the piece that is going to help me do that one thing. Video, in contrast, really helps you with the tasks that require you to see how something is done over time. So if you want to learn a specific painting technique, it's hard to do that in a static tutorial. You really need to see it in video form. And so the question was, how do we take the advantages? How do we take the benefits of both? So, and so the approach was really to take a system, a user demonstration system, is to make this, and to create these mixed media tutorials. So a mixed media tutorial is something you see here in this video. This is essentially a static tutorial, but each picture is also a video. So here you see that I clicked on that picture and then it became a video, and I can see more details of how this particular drawing is done. And there are different versions of the video. You can see the entire screencast, or a particular, a specific part, a crop version, or you can see kind of the whole frame for context and then see a zoomed version of it, which highlights the parts that the user actually touched in the interface. And so the idea of these mixed media tutorials was really to take, to let you scan the way you would a static tutorial, but then in those parts where you wanted more detail, you could reference the video. And the Mixty system was really trying to do this as automatically as possible, right? So creating video tutorials is really easy. You just turn on the camera and start performing. What if creating these types of mixed media tutorials was just as easy? And so that's what the system is really about. And so we showed that these mixed media tutorials are in fact better than video or static tutorials alone. And this details on demand approach really allows the users to quickly jump to the point of interest. And so again, Mixty was focused on consumption. It was interactive experience because you could scan and jump ahead. It's something, again, you could do one time or iteratively, depending on who you are. And again, individual experience. All right, so next, let's jump to Oriole. Okay. So Oriole is a system built by several researchers at Adobe. and an intern who joined us back in 2018. And this was work that was published at CHI 2019. And the idea of Oriole was really to look at how we might take advantage of some of the human pose understanding that's possible today. So let's jump in. So in the work, in this research, the goal was really to make it much easier to create videos like this one. So here we have Hans Rosling. He's talking about the relationship between lifespan and income. And to create this video, Hans Rosling really couldn't do it himself, right? He had to hire a production team and spend many hours working. And so the goal of the Oriole project was to make this type of authoring much easier by allowing people to create mappings between the human pose and animated graphics. And so here's the type of video one can create with Oriole. This is Sakib, the first author and former intern, who worked with us on this. And he's telling us about what it's like to live in Seattle, especially in November. And so, so to create this experience, all one has to do is draw the graphics. So in this case, the umbrella, and to connect it to the skeleton representing the human pose or motion. And so here are some of the stories that people were able to create with Oriole. So this is Claire. She's telling you about how to boil eggs. And here is an astronomer talking about his research. And here is an interior decorator who's showing how to decorate a room and how to, I guess in this case, clean your windows. So what the Oriole system shows is that you can use so human body abstraction, so being able to connect how the body moves to motion graphics is useful. And there's this really rich space of opportunities for these live action videos and object-aware sketching interfaces. I think especially these days as video understanding and pose tracking gets better and better, I think it's really exciting to see these kinds of interfaces where you don't need to do programming to really offer these types of very rich experiences. And as far as how Oriole fits into the framework, this is a very classic creative tool. It's very much focused on creation. It's interactive, iterative, and done on your own. And so let's jump ahead to the end, putting it all together. So we saw 4 different systems. Hopefully the order was not too distracting for you and all kind of fits together in your brains. I think what's interesting to look at is that there has been a lot of interesting research across the spectrum, both for consumption and for creation. Of course, a lot of it is interactive, which is great, although you might want to ask, well, what would a different passive interface look like, right? Much of it is focused on iterative experiences. I think that the thing that jumps out to me is that there hasn't been as much work around collaboration in video. There's some collaborative video authoring, but really collaborative video consumption. I haven't seen as much research in that space. I know there are these watching parties that are happening more and more. And so but I think, you know, as we think about, one way we could use this framework is to think about what are opportunities for future research and where are there gaps in the space where new cool things are useful. And so to conclude, I hope I've convinced you that we need to be thinking more about video and how to make it easier to deal with video. And as HCI researchers, it's really our responsibility to make it easier for everyone to communicate with video. I started this talk with a little bit about what's happening in schools, or at least was happening in schools before the pandemic. And it's it's good to check in with how things are there now. And while this isn't, the universal experience, I can tell you my experience. This is my son. He's 7. He's in 2nd grade. He doesn't use any of the tools that I showed you in the previous slides. He uses Zoom and Schoology and Seesaw. He talks to his class over video, and he now knows how to unmute and mute himself, how to change his background, how to be silly in the chat. He records videos of his artwork. He shares it with his teacher and his classmates. He does, almost all of his assignments online, and he watches YouTube videos that were created by his teachers. And until this spring, I mean, his teacher had never, ever taught online. But now she has to. She doesn't have a choice. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I'm happy to take your questions. I think we have still a few minutes.
Thank you, Mira. Excellent. So panelists, go ahead and unmute yourselves if you want to ask questions. Mira, you can go ahead and stop your video if you, or you stop sharing your screen if you want to see us.
Yeah, that's great.
And for all the attendees, all approximately of 100 of you who are not panelists, I'll send out a link that is for where you can submit your questions. There we go. So we have a couple minutes for questions. We have some in the queue already, but I would like to invite a panelist if they want to start. All right. Well, one we got in the queue already was a question that asked whether the needs, when you looked at the needs of viewers of streamers with large audiences, whether those differ from viewers of smaller streamers.
I mean, I think absolutely. So also when you say larger versus smaller, there's, I would ask you, what do you mean by larger versus smaller? Because there are streams with thousands of viewers, and then there's, so that would be kind of one way to divide it up. But I think if you look at really, really large streams, I mean, there is this problem with, the audience being able to communicate, period, right? So communicate with each other, communicate with the streamer, right? The chat is often just like scrolling off the page, and it's hard to consume it at all, right? And there has been research on trying to make that more consumable by making smaller groups, for example, or trying to summarize what's going on in the chat. So for large streams, very different problems. I think the smaller streams, again, it really depends on what kind of stream it is, if the people know each other. So sometimes these streams are very, especially in the creative community, very tight-knit groups. So they all know each other. And so when somebody joins a stream, the artist will often be like, oh, hey, how are you? What's going on, right? And so you end up with these personal conversations, which maybe are not that interesting to everyone, right? So in a smaller stream, you might want to be able to navigate those, those types of conversations, flag those so you can just kind of skip over them, maybe if you're watching a recording, or maybe even have something live that's like, oh, unmute this. I'm going to mute this now, unmute it for me automatically whenever they stop chit-chatting and actually get back to like talking about the art, right? So you can imagine definitely different types of tools for these different types of streams.
We have another question that I think ties into this. It was asking, do you think that these kinds of tools, which each seem really useful for a specific kind of creation, might result in a splintered experience for video consumers who have to learn a bunch of different interfaces?
I guess I don't know that I understand the question exactly. Can you either say it again or
I can try
for me?
I think the question is essentially asking, if we create all of these special purpose tools for specific contexts, are we going to be splintering the sort of user experience in a way where no one knows which tool to go to when, or everyone winds up with the sort of lowest common denominator?
So I think this is in the context of like authoring. Is this in the context of like authoring interfaces? So if I'm authoring video lectures versus authoring, I don't know, a performance art, maybe you'd have different types of tools. I guess I still don't quite feel like I understand the question very well, but I guess I'll say on the creation side, I think there is this question of, do you want to have a very task-specific interface, or do you want to have a general purpose interface? Ideally, you have a task-specific interface and then can adapt itself into something that's more general purpose, so that, if you wanted to do more things that are not just the task-specific thing, you can move in that direction. But there's, of course, challenge in doing any kind of adaptation. I think there is a challenge that maybe is what this question is about, around like, if I use one interface that's very different than yours, then how can you learn from my experience using it, right? What we see a lot on YouTube today around learning content is that, you know, how-to videos are like one of the most common type of learning content on YouTube. And so if I teach you how to use Photoshop with my version of Photoshop, but your Photoshop looks totally different, then you can't really make use of it, of my video, right? So I do think that is one problem with having highly customized interfaces, is that it becomes harder for others to teach each other. And so I think there we would need new tools that let you adapt, right? Like I'd love to see something that can take your video with your version and kind of show me what that means in my version. But we don't have that today.
All right. Panelists, questions?
Yeah, I have just a follow-up. So I'm still in the process of being convinced, and I think it's probably because you're talking to a sociologist, and so not necessarily a technical person in the way HCI is. And so you end with this sort of, you know, the scenario of your children going to school online. But if you talk to most educators today, especially of younger children, they're saying that online video education is failing us, right? And I also think you have a very great case right now, like this fantastic natural experiment in which we are forced to be on video. And I think there's moments where you can see both at play. For example, the chat we have going on, there is a chat that goes on because people are having these private conversations offline in a way that you couldn't do in real life. And I guess I'm just sort of putting it out there that I think there's still a lot of avenue for exploration and other ways in which you can really think about the intersections of all these different ways of communicating and to make them work. I'm not saying video is not the way to go. You know, in our own field, we've been really thinking about how video can be used to do qualitative interviewing and qualitative research, for example. And I think a sort of, it opens up avenues, but it's also not a replacement for old ones, right? Ethnography over video is not the same as going into a space and learning about a space. So those are sort of some thoughts.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for all those points. I think they're great. And I can tell you that absolutely, it is not as good for my 7-year-old. School is not as good. That is true. And it is, and you know, it's not going to be the only method. And I really hope that video in 10 years is really different than video today, right? I mean, there are, you said, Michael, like over 100 people here. We are not having a conversation with over 100 people, right? Some people are quiet and some are talking. Some don't want to be visible and some are. And those of you who have been on video all day are probably exhausted and like can't wait to turn this off, right? So absolutely, there are huge, interesting questions and opportunities. As I said, in my own work, I've actually started doing a lot of text, a lot of writing, a lot of asynchronous communication because people are on different schedules. And so we can't actually get even at this, you know, in the same video room. It's just not possible. So I agree with you. There's lots of opportunity for interesting new modalities, and video, I think, will be a part of it for sure.